A lot of people are wondering whether or not more people are dying, especially the young. And this is what I am looking out for as well. And if you don't quite understand where I'm coming from, I've been speaking about autoimmune responses related to the spike protein and COVID since 2020. So I'm always looking for problems. I would be the equivalent of the person in the 1950s when everybody was smoking, saying, listen, this is going to be a problem. And I wouldn't stop talking about it because I know it's going to be a problem. In the same way, I know we are going to have serious problems down the line. Some of it is presenting now, some of it may take a decade to show. But if we don't continue to try and find answers, very soon we will see the outcomes coming in front of us. This is where I am. And so today, what I'm talking about is a paper, an Italian paper, Sudden Cardiac Death in the Young, single center study of Barry autopsy cases. Now, what you have to realize is that how I find these papers is that I deliberately search for histology and autopsy because that is the gold standard to be able to figure out what is happening pathologically in the population. Anything else is an opinion. We may have some ideas about that maybe more people are dying, but we don't know why. And we can extrapolate, but we don't know why. So, the critical piece of the puzzle for me was an important study done in Japan about multiple microscars. It was only three patients, and a lot of people discounted it because it was only three patients. The premise is that if you have a situation where you're seeing abnormal pathology, you need to understand the extent of it across the population. And so, just to give you some background, this is the picture of a heart. Heart contains four chambers, the ventricles, two ventricles, and two atria, pumping the blood into the ventricles, and then they pump it through the lungs or around the body. And essentially, what they found in Japan was these tiny little scars scattered all throughout the heart of these patients who died in an abnormal way. It was because they had recurrent cardiac arrests with arrhythmias and they didn't know why. And they then found a pathology that they had not seen before. It may have been coincidental that all those patients were boosted, but as we say, it was only a small study. But because of that, I recognize that we are likely to see similar patterns occurring across the pandemic. So let's look in a little bit more detail about this single center study and what exactly they were looking for and what I am looking at and my analysis. Important to understand, this is my analysis, so you can't necessarily take it and say, this is what the paper or authors were saying. This is me analyzing their data, not necessarily their own opinion. So the first thing is the definition. Sudden cardiac death is one of the main causes of death in the world with a significant impact, especially on young people. And in order to understand the formal definition, it has it here in the paper as well. And they define it as is a dramatic and unexpected event that can affect individuals of any age, frequently in those who appear to be in good health. It is generally defined as death occurring within 1 hour of symptom onset or within 24 hours of the last time the individual was seen alive in an unwitnessed case, or in patients who are resuscitated following cardiac arrest but subsequently die in hospital. So it's a pretty clear definition. And we all know of at least one friend of the family or someone at work or at school who has died suddenly. So it's not as if this is uncommon. This does happen and it has always happened. The first question is it happening more frequently? And since nobody is studying it, all we can do is look at the current data. And when I say nobody is studying it, it seems as though there is a fear of actually looking in detail at what is going on. So what I've done is this paper in one locality in Italy. So this is again not a picture of Italy, but it gives us a trend. And here you can see in this image here, when they look at the judicial autopsies, that means in people who had sudden death who needed to have an autopsy, 2016, 2024, as you can see, it is a gradual rise from 2018, 2020, 2022, 2024. This is the highest it has ever been. Of course, some people would say that is purely coincidental. It doesn't mean there's an elephant in the room. It is just random that more people in that locality are dying of sudden cardiac death. So, moving on, what really am I looking for? I'm looking for inflammation and I am looking for anything that suggests autoimmune responses. So I've sat down and gone through a table in this paper to give you an idea of the kinds of things that I'm trying to understand. And one of them is a condition that we call fragmentation of cardiomyocytes. So this is it here. It's in blue. So this is the description of the table. And I've highlighted a few things. This fragmentation of cardiomyocytes, I've highlighted that because that is what typically happens in an arrhythmic death. Normally, sudden, unusual arrhythmia and an impact on the heart, and there is fragmentation of the muscle cells in the heart. And it's a characteristic pattern that occurred in the past when it was purely down to an electrical arrhythmia in the heart. Literally, the heart suddenly goes into collapses, and if they die, you would tend to see that kind of fragmentation of the muscles in the heart. Conversely, the other thing that I'm looking at, and I've highlighted this in orange here, is anything that suggests a degree of inflammation, intramural fibrosis, lymphohistiocytic inflammation, interstitial fibrosis, and I've included the coronary artery intimal fibrous thickening. And the question is, what is the trajectory over that period of time from 2016 to 2024? And this is how the table was set up. They look at the year, they give the autopsies a number, the age, the sex, the clinical characteristics, what they see when they look at the heart, what you see on histology, and their diagnosis. The bit I'm interested in is the histology. And wherever you see it dark, black, I have excluded anyone less than the age of 10. Okay. And I've concentrated just in the older teenagers or older, and you can see the ages all the way down. Now, what's interesting is I've highlighted in blue this fragmentation of the cardiomyocytes. And you can see from 2016, it's primarily one of the main things that you will see. As we come into 2020, you can still see some more in 2021, but as you go down, it starts to get more scattered. And by 2024, it isn't there at all. Conversely, the ones that I've highlighted that are suggestive of inflammation in terms of histology, we can see that the orange bits tend to be dominating since 2020. And that is suggestive. It's not never happened before, but it's far more frequent in the post-pandemic period. And this fits with exactly what I would have predicted, which is that there are two things that cause inflammation of the heart. Well, actually, it's one thing that causes inflammation of the heart. It just happens that it's connected to the virus and it's the spike protein of the virus. And therefore, you can imagine what that one thing is from an elephant. So, the source of inflammation comes from two sources. And this is why I predict that inflammatory processes in the heart have got to increase. If you told me that the whole country started smoking, I would tell you that you're guaranteed that across the population, in time, you're going to have heart disease, lung cancer, and a number of other comorbidities associated with vascular damage or lung damage. That's just an extrapolation of the science. I don't need to do a peer-reviewed study to tell me that smoking now is going to cause damage. In the same way, if you understand the response that spike protein does in the context of the heart, it shouldn't take a genius to tell you that you are going to see a lot more inflammatory and fibrotic changes in the heart. How will it present? More unusual arrhythmias, palpitations, and in the future, it may be associated with increases in sudden cardiac death. As I said, and I showed you before, the evidence from Italy at the moment, and I'll show you again so that you can see it, is that in that locality, there is already an increase in the numbers of sudden cardiac deaths for all ages. What we need is more studies like this. This is only one small section of what needs to happen. My belief is that we need thousands of autopsies. To be frank with you, any abnormal death, I would want a full autopsy being done. The reason it's not being done, part of it is because of funding. Part of it is because of limitations to the numbers of pathologists. But I know that if there is a determination, we can use artificial intelligence, we can use punch biopsies of the different organs in the body, and use and study to at least collect the evidence. At the moment, there is no evidence being collected. And this is why you are being told there is no evidence of, because there can be no evidence of if you are not doing the research, if you are not collecting the samples. And as populations in highly vaccinated regions continue to have mortality above the 2015 to 2019 trend line, even though huge numbers have died in the pandemic, it's an absolute red flag, and it should be investigated thoroughly. This is what should have been done since 2022 when they started to see the patterns. Nobody did it. And I maintain that this, or not doing that then, was a failure. Not doing it now as a much stronger word, which I can't afford to say, but you can imagine it. This is serious stuff. And frankly, people may ask, what can you do about it? Whatever you do, raise awareness. The fact that we need autopsies, as many as possible, and not doing them is not helping anyone. Whether you disagree with what I say or you agree with what I say, until we have autopsies, we don't have any hard evidence. Final thought, just look at the trajectory of this line. You know where it's going to be in 2028, and this is going to be happening all over the world. The longer we sit on it, the worse it's going to get. Remember, like, subscribe, support, share, and talk. That's the most that everyone can do. Have a great evening.
A hero, an immune adventure. Humming Heroes, your lyrical guide to the body's defenders. Now on Amazon. Check the links below.